webinar series, Vykhari 2021, organized by the Department of Sociology, Bishop Chulapermal Memorial College, Kottayam. We will be getting a chance to know more and have a fruitful discussion about the topic gendered colorism and caste in Malayalam movie. It is mark of undying tradition to invoke the Almighty at the beginning of an important event. Like the great philosopher once said, the function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of one who prays. I like to call upon Anija Ose for the prayer song.
കാത്തിടൂ ദൈവമേ, കണ്ണിമയ്ക്കാത്ത കാത്തിടൂ ദൈവമേ, കയാനെന്നെ പുൽകുമാരാകണേ, കരളിലും നിലവിലും നിന്റെ സ്നേഹമേ കേണമേ, നിന്റെ വഴിയായി ചിരം നീങ്ങുമാരാകണേ, സത്യധർമ്മങ്ങളോടു പാവപ്പോൾ നീതു നൽകണമേ, സത്യധർമ്മങ്ങളോടു പാവപ്പോൾ നീതു നൽകണമേ, സഹചരെ കൈപിടിച്ചുയർത്തുവാൻ ത്രാണിയേകണമേ, സഹചരെ കൈപിടിച്ചുയർത്തുവാൻ ത്രാണിയേകണമേ, കണ്ണിമയ്ക്കാത്ത കാവലായി
Without further ado, I invite our backbone, the HOD of our department, Assistant Professor Alfonso Kurian, to welcome you all to this meeting. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning to all present here for today's international webinar. Vykhari, the international webinar series of BCM College, is aimed at disseminating knowledge at various facets, irrespective of subject boundaries. It has envisioned to recondition the research possibilities, updates worldwide in an interdisciplinary manner. It's my privilege to welcome our speaker, Ms. Uttara Geeta, for International Webinar, hosted by Department of Sociology, Bishop Cholaparambil Memorial College, Kottayam. Speaking about Ms. Uttara Geeta, she's a young, vibrant research aspirant. Is currently pursuing the most prestigious European Union-sponsored Erasmus Mundus double master's degree in gender studies. She is an aspiring gender economist who is deeply passionate about gender and Dalit issues. Uttara has consistently performed well in academics and co-curricular, securing awards and recognition from UNICEF, Chief Minister's Award, Special Jury Award by Government of Kerala, Ambedkar Scholarship, and so on. After completing her master's in Applied Economics from CTS, she has been selected for Erasmus Mundus Scholarship from University of York and University of Oviedo. Ms. Uttara Geeta, I welcome you to this international webinar. At this juncture, I extend welcome to our College Principal, Dr. Steffi Thomas, Vice Principal, Dr. Anno Thomas, Bursar, Reverend Father Philemon Kalatara, HODs from various departments, faculty members from our college and other various colleges, colleagues, students to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfonso ma'am. The main part of today's program is the keynote address of Ms. Uttara Geeta. She is an Erasmus Mundus scholar at Oviedo and University of York. I invite Uttara ma'am for the keynote address. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello, I'm joining from the phone right now because the net has gone.
Okay, Geeta. Uttara, continue. Okay, Uttara. We can wait for our speaker.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Uttara, fine.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. We lost the internet here for a while. Thank you so much for the welcome. My name is Uttara Geeta. Now I'm currently an Erasmus scholar. I'm enrolled in both University of Oviedo and University of York. I would first like to thank the Sociology Department of BCM College, especially Alfonso Korean ma'am, for inviting me and being very cool with any topic I would have chose and guiding me across this webinar series. And I would also like to thank the college, the principal, and all the students who are here to hear this talk. So while we were deciding what topic to choose, I asked Alfonso ma'am, what should I choose? There are a couple of areas I've been working with inside the field of gender, and she told me that this is to introduce the students who are mostly bachelor students to this whole new field of gender, which is still new in India. So I thought, rather than just presenting my thesis and telling what I did research on, I would go for a step-by-step tutorial to see how doing gender looks like, or how to do gender research. So I'll try to share my PPT right now. Is my screen visible? Is my PPT?
Not yet. Not yet.
Is it visible now?
No.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the topic for today's seminar is gendered colorism and caste in Malayalam movies. It's a little sneak peek into doing gender research, as I just told you right now. So first, I'll start with what gender research means. So people are kind of confused and always ask me, which field is it? So I always tell them I'm gender economics students because I'm from the economics field and I'm doing gender within economics right now. And people are quite confused how gender and economics go together. So gender can be positioned in relation to different fields of study. It could be humanities, arts, social science. It's about doing and understanding that gender is a social construct, it's a social phenomenon, and gender research has the ability for societal change. And we are focused on reducing inequality on all fronts with special emphasis on gender discrimination. So there are also gender institutes, gender centers specifically for just doing gender research, which is also usually multidisciplinary. So gender research addresses in some form the tenacity of gender power relations and how gender inequalities work in different areas. So you can do research on gender and employment, you can do research on gender and violence, and when sociology, you can do household dynamics, you can do power struggles, and all these forms gender inequality and gender research. And one thing we should always look about is how, while doing gender, is other sciences, other social sciences, other humanities come in contact with it. So it is an interconnected field of research. And there are also, like, if you're interested in theory development especially, then it's better to go for gender centers and women centers. But if you are interested in gender discrimination and you want to do research based on gender, you can do it in any field because it's interconnected, transnational, interdisciplinary. But what we should also be keen about is that it is also very region specific. You can understand that, like, gender inequality exists everywhere, all over, it's universal, but it also has specific traits related to each.
Uttara? We can wait. Today, I think it's a heavy rain and electricity problem everywhere. So I think many connectivity issues are there here and there. We can wait for the speaker.
Okay, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, yes, Uttara, fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. It's clear, audible.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I think it's because of the hartal, the electricity keeps going and there's no one to take. Okay.
No issues, no issues.
So the focus on gender means testing conventional disciplinary boundaries and developing alternative methodologies. Because it's relatively a new field, we borrow from different fields, sociological tools, historical tools, and economic tools, and we use it to study gender research while also developing gender methodologies which can be used exclusively for gender research. So in this topic, in this webinar, I would be taking my master's Erasmus thesis to guide you through the step-by-step tutorial on how to do gender research. One thing we should all be aware about is when we say we are doing gender research or we are doing something on gender, it starts with questioning the status quo, and we look for reasons and think, why is it so? In terms of gender discrimination, you're viewing the world through a critical lens, like in any other form of research, and thinking, why is it so? Why is the woman in the family doing all the household chores? Why is it that men are regarded as the earners in the family? Why is it that daughters can not go out at night, but sons can? So these are all questions we start asking. So this is one of my favorite quotes. This is a very good book. I would like to recommend to all students to read it because it's a very basic book. It tells you about how to get into doing research and how it transforms your life while also helping you to transform other lives. So it's by Sarah Ahmed. It's called A Living a Feminist Life. So she talks about feminism. which is gender equality. And she terms it as doing it yourself. We say it about crafts, we say it about gardening, do it yourself hacks. So just like that, feminism is also something that you do yourself. It starts with a form of self assembly. It often means being prepared to be undone. That is, gender studies has a lot to do with unlearning what we have been taught from childhood and learning new stuff rather than just learning an entirely new thing. So you start with unlearning yourself. So she also says feminist theory taught me that the universal is what needs to be explored. The status quo, what things we think are obvious or given, that's where we start from, and that's what we try to explore. So gender research is kind of a lens. We look at the world through a gendered lens. And we also, one of the most important things in any kind of research, and especially in gender, is to focus on specific research questions. As I told you earlier, even though patriarchy is universal, each state, each region, each place has its own specific context. So we need to be focusing on specific research questions and integrate theories to make sense of what we got as conclusion from our research. More often, a social science questions cannot be answered with just one theory or two theories. We'll have to borrow because it's so multidisciplinary. It's just everywhere. So you keep reading and you keep finding theories which can make sense of the conclusions. And I have heard a lot of people saying that it's just, you're naming things which are obvious. But we need to name things which are obvious in order to start making changes. So you name the problem and you suggest changes. That's the basic thing. Societal transformation starts with naming and stating and pointing out the obvious. And we are asking, why is it so? Why can't it be this way? So one of the most underestimated agents of change, and more often it needs to emerge from intellectual spaces, and it is on students like us and scholars like us and professors like our teachers around here who should start questioning and name and state and point out the obvious. So now I would be moving on to my thesis, which was Diction of Brown Bodies, an exploration of gendered colorism and representation through Malayalam movies. So in 2019, I was in the UK, and there was this protest. Everyone knows, we all know about Black Lives Matters. And I was just sitting there thinking about what to do, which course to do, which topic to choose. And I noticed that in India, when the Black Lives Matters happened, there were a lot of celebrities who came and stood against it and were saying, like, we support this movement and we should, support race equality and everything. And I kept wondering, there's something missing, because in our world, in India, in the Indian society, we see so much of racism, which is hidden under the guise of, appearance. We see police targeting darker skinned people with particular signs. And also it's an everyday practice we keep hearing. So like if I go on a vacation and I have a suntan and I come back and my aunties will be like, oh, use turmeric, or like, use basin. So these are all the comments we see in everyday life. So it just came to me like how colorism operates here in India and how important it is to address it, because it's kind of hypocritical of the celebrities and everyone to come forward and say support Black Lives Matters while endorsing skin whitening creams and stuff like no marks and lighten your skin, brighten your skin, which kind of brings out the inadequacy of the darker skin. Thought I would look at colorism in the Indian society and how it affects the representation and how it affects gender and everything. So first, when we look at gender research, so this particular topic came to my mind, colorism. What is colorism? It is the active practice of skin-based discrimination in the Indian society, and Indian society has deep-rooted colorism. it's in the simple dialogues. When we look at marriage market, you see like, fair brides needed, fair grooms needed. This is like a demand and supply. It's there everywhere, and it comes from the complex history of early racial mixing, because we are a mixed race society. Everyone is brown, and there's a very evident hierarchy when it comes to skin color, where the lighter skin is much more desired. And we have rigid social systems like class and caste, which kind of is integrated into colorism, and obviously colonization plays a huge part. So when you identify a specific issue, so I decided that I'm going to do it on colorism. So you contextualize it, you put it into context, you see why is there colorism existent in Indian society, and why is it so deep rooted. So that's when you start using literature review and read. And I cannot stress how important reading is, especially in social sciences. There's a huge body of work on anything, and even if for example, gendered colorism in movies is like a relatively new one, but still you go to the related fields and you go to sociology. I went to genetics even to see how racial mixing in India exists, to see if there is a kind of regional difference or caste difference or a class difference when it comes to skin color. So you have a lot to read, and it is very important to read as much as you can. And in particular, so like when I started doing the literature review, I noticed this thing that after colonization, what the Indian society did was they kind of took colorism and racism and then kind of pushed it into the existing social inequalities like gender, caste, class, and region. And this were reinterpreted in terms of skin color. So the people in the position of power, like when you talk about gender, it's cis men. And when you talk about caste, it's upper caste men and women, and class is upper class, and region is north. So all these people, all the variables which had like a higher hierarchy or power position, these were reinterpreted in terms of lighter skin tone. So anyone who is upper caste, upper class, and from north were regarded as lighter skinned and thus better. And when we look about any variable, when we're doing gender research, we also think how gender affects the issue and how the issue affects the gender and the role and the degree. So when I was doing gender colorism, I was thinking in modern India, it's very evident that gender is a part of, like gender kind of plays a part, very important part in colorism, because usually it is the women who is expected to be lighter skinned. We see a couple and we see a darker guy and a lighter skinned girl. It kind of passes as, yeah, it's given. But if it's the other way around, you always say, oh my God, poor boy. So we have heard this many times, and this kind of shows, this is an example of colorism, how colorism works in modern India. It's very gendered. And in the present day, with beauty market and cosmetics and, looking thin and fair and, straight hair has all become a part of the modern cosmopolitan life. And this kind of creates an inadequacy of darker skin and is very colorist and racist in nature. And it also molds our personality. So I think most of us, നമ്മുടെ അമ്മമാരൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട് വെളിയിൽ പോയി കളിക്കല്ലേ കറക്കും, വെയിലത്ത് നിൽക്കല്ലേ കറക്കും. This all comes in different forms in different people, but one thing remains, which is like the gender in it. ആണുങ്ങളാണെങ്കിൽ വെളിയിൽ പോയി കളിക്കാം, വെയിലത്ത് പോയി കളിക്കാം. പെണ്ണുങ്ങളാണെങ്കിൽ അങ്ങനെ കറക്കുന്നതിനോട് ഒരു ഇച്ചിരിയും കൂടെ പ്രശ്നമാണ്. So this is how gendered colorism works. So this is how I came to the topic, and I thought I would do. When you look at any topic, for example, it's gendered colorism here, and I was like, what is the relevance? Why am I doing it? Why should I do it? So in simple words, colorism is a system of structural hierarchy. ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ തന്നെ lighter skin comes at the higher position and darker skin like അത് നമ്മുടെ ഭാഷയിൽ we can sense it in our language. For example, നമ്മൾ പറയാ dark ആണെങ്കിലും കാണാൻ നല്ലത്. So you are giving concession, even though she is dark, even though that is an inadequacy, it is okay because she has features. So this is how like it becomes a qualifier, like skin color becomes a qualifier. So the lighter you are, the better privilege you have. It's not just in looks. ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ റിവ്യൂ ചെയ്തപ്പോൾ it was evident that, you know, in workplaces, especially employment, when it comes to employment, women are more tightly spun into industries such as like service industry, and they kind of demand for better appearance, which means lighter skinned people. So if you see like a receptionist or like air hostess or ground staff, all these people, all these employers prefer lighter skinned people over darker skinned people. So this affects not just appearance but also economically, in marriage market, in everywhere. So, and also like these cosmetics, these contain like mercury and steroids, and it affects you mentally, it affects you physically. So it's kind of like structural violence against the bodies of women, which requires a systematic dismantling of racialized patriarchy that tries to control the body of women. So this was the relevance, like we have to stop trying to lighten our skin, trying to darken our skin. In abroad, it's exactly the opposite. People sit in the sun for hours. So this is all capitalism and consumerism trying to make consumers in specialized areas just so that they can sell the products. And this is structural violence because it just doesn't happen at institutional level, but also in our household. So it has a lot of layers to it. And when you look at a thesis, you should also pinpoint, you should focus. So if I look at gendered colorism in India, it's huge. Where do I start? There's regional differences. There's so many things to look at. Do I look at the market? Do I look at history of it? Or do I look at the cinemas? Or do I look at the advertisement? There's a lot. So you need to like pinpoint and focus your research. So I was looking at representation, how beauty ideals are represented and targeted at women. Because women are considered as the object of desire, which Simone Beauvoir in The Second Sex explains beautifully, and later Irigaray and like a lot of people, a lot of main feminists have commented on this, that how women becomes the object of desire in a patriarchal society. So this creates deep-rooted physical and mental health, where people start to think about the inadequacy and always tries to, there's a continuous pursuit of lighter skin. So I decided to focus my study on looking at the gender pattern of colorism and representation of women's body in India, with special focus on Malayalam movies, because I am a Malayali, I'm more acquainted. So when you look at humanities, this comes under humanities because it's based on movies. So when you look at humanities, it's better when you have a context, when it's better when you know the context. So it's better when you are subjective and you can take out. So like I've heard this thing about objectivity in science and subjectivity in social science. It's kind of, it has been proven that everything is subjective and everything has its bias. So it's good to say that, you're biased and this is your positionality. So as a Malayali scholar, I thought it would be better if I do Malayalam movies and take Malayalam movies, because I know the context so well. And why movies? Cinemas are like it's placed between, it's an intersectional space between art and commerce. It is entertainment and it is commercial. So it's kind of like an excellent medium to capture popular perceptions and also the market, what sells in this current market. The popularity of cinema as a form of entertainment among the middle and lower middle class in India points to the influence it holds. It is the largest form of entertainment. It has the largest share when it comes to India, because every middle class, lower middle class and above people, this is the single most form of entertainment and leisure. So when it comes to research questions, my professor always tells me, do not form your research questions on starting with des, is it, or why not, because these are questions which has yes or no, and your research question should not be answered with just yes or no. Yes or no എന്നുള്ളൊരു ആൻസർ കൊണ്ട് തീർക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്ന research questions should never be asked. So you should need more explanation. You should need questions which can ask more specific, can delve into more specific matters. So I sat and thought about what should I do, what should I look at this thesis about, what should I see, and these are the three things I looked at. One is, what are the evidences for explicit or implicit colorism in the films? അതായത് ഈ ഫിലിമില് കളറിസം നമുക്ക് വ്യക്തമായിട്ട് കാണാം ത്രൂ ഡയലോഗ്സ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവർ എക്സ്പ്ലിസിറ്റ് ആയിട്ട് സ്കിൻ കളർ പറയുന്നുണ്ടോ, അതോ ഇംപ്ലിസിറ്റ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത് ആക്ടേഴ്സിനെ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ ഡാർക്കർ സ്കിൻ ടോൺ ഉള്ള ആക്ടേഴ്സ് ഏതൊക്കെ റോൾ ചെയ്യുന്നു, ലൈറ്റർ സ്കിൻ റോൾ ഉള്ള ആൾക്കാർ ഏതൊക്കെ റോൾ ചെയ്യുന്നു, ആൺ പെൺ വ്യത്യാസമുണ്ടോ സ്കിൻ കളർ, ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഇംപ്ലിസിറ്റ്. So I'm looking at both explicit and implicit colors in the movie, and also the pattern of color coding of roles. Color coding of roles means darker skinned ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആൾക്കാർ ഒരു പെർട്ടിക്കുലർ ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് റോൾസ് ആണോ ചെയ്യുന്നത്, ഹീറോസ് ആൻഡ് ഹീറോയിൻസ് എപ്പോഴും ലൈറ്റർ സ്കിൻഡ് ആണോ, ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് കളർ കോഡ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടോ ആക്ടേഴ്സിനെ എന്ന് നോക്കുന്നത്. സെക്കൻഡ് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ആർ വാട്ട് ആർ ദ സ്പെസിഫിക് സോഷ്യോ കൾച്ചറൽ ആൻഡ് എക്കണോമിക് കോണറ്റേഷൻ. അത് ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ റിവ്യൂ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ജെൻഡർ, ക്ലാസ് ആൻഡ് കാസ്റ്റ് ആൻഡ് ഈ കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ ഇൻഫ്ലുവൻസസ് colorism, and colorism is influenced by this also. So when a darker body appears in the screen, what are the social, cultural, economic connotation attached to it, and why is the second question. And the third question is, what is the gender pattern of colorism? Is skin color very similar for female actors and male actors, or is skin color the only basis of difference between actors, or is there a gender pattern of colorism in the selected film? And especially because this is about bodies of women, how are dark-skinned women in particular represented in the films? So these are the questions. And we have to tie it to literature review, and we have to see if these research questions cover a research gap, or does it add to the existing literature, or is it critiquing the literature? So these are the three things you should look at. നമ്മളൊരു റിസർച്ച് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ ഇതുവരെ ചെയ്യാത്ത എന്തെങ്കിലും ചെയ്യുവാണ് ആയത്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ ഓൾറെഡി ഉള്ള ലിറ്ററേച്ചറിലേക്ക് നമ്മൾ ആഡ് ചെയ്യും കൂടുതൽ എന്തെങ്കിലും, ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇപ്പോൾ ഉള്ള ലിറ്ററേച്ചറിനെ ക്രിട്ടിക്ക് ചെയ്യാം. വി ഹാവ് ടു ഡു any of this or additions of it. Methodology is very important in all research. So in my research, I took close reading. Close reading means you see this movie and you look at its culture, you look at its context, you look at the meaning it gives to the audience. That is why positionality is so important. Me as a Malayali woman, how do I see this movie and what meaning do I get from it? And the form and the media. And as we all know, we have a really good Malayalam film industry which produces around 70 to 90 films a year. So it is not possible for me to take such a year. We always have to keep in mind the timeline. It's always good to maintain the quality rather than take up a lot of quantity. So I went for purposive sampling. So I had two criteria. One was films which had darker skinned actors playing female leads within the period of last 10 years. So while I was doing this movie, only two movies qualified, Kammati Padam and Celluloid. I hope most of us have watched these two movies. So these were the only movies which were from the mainstream production houses and not independent artsy movies, because I wanted to see popular perception, right? So these two criteria, and these were the only movies which had dark-skinned female leads, which shows, 2 out of 90 films a year had 2 out of 900 films, 700 to 900 films had a female lead with dark skin. Okay, so we're moving on to the first movie, Celluloid. I hope most of us have seen. Celluloid is a Malayalam language movie which talks about J.C. Daniel, the father of Malayalam movies. So when we write a thesis, what we should know is we should know the audience. Who would be reading our thesis? Who would be reading our research paper? And how do we structure it? Because I wrote it for an international audience, I had to explain the context. I had to explain the basic details of the movie, the socio-political context, and the plot summary, because they might not get to watch the movie. So we have to know the audience before placing the whole thesis and writing it. So we have to know who we are writing for and what do we want out of it. So I divided this thesis chapter, which is based on celluloid, into 3 themes. One is Brahminical patriarchy, second is decolonialism, and third is cinema. And while I separated these sub-themes, what I'm looking at is how these representations are informed by colorism, because that is our topic. So moving on to the main thesis. First one was Shades of Brahminical Patriarchy. So Brahminical patriarchy is Indian feminist gender thought, which talks about how patriarchy is molded in India. What is the kind of patriarchy which exists in India? India is kind of like a heterogeneous union of states, right? You can't say that, India is very homogeneous, where all Indians, we speak the same language, we eat the same food. It's not like that. But there is a pan-Indian which can be applied to all states in India, a pan-Indian strain of patriarchy, which Uma Chakravarti and Sharmila Rege all accepts as Brahminical patriarchy, which kind of tries to control the social and sexual lives of women to maintain patrilineal succession, a requirement of all patriarchal society, but also caste purity. That is where Brahminical patriarchy is different from universal patriarchy, which is unique to Hindu society. എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ബ്രാഹ്മണിക്കൽ പേട്രിയാർക്കി എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ മാത്രമുള്ള ഹിന്ദു സൊസൈറ്റിയിൽ മാത്രം യുണീക്ക് ആയിട്ടുള്ളൊരു patriarchal structure ആണ്, patriarchal working ആണ്, where women's bodies, women's social life is controlled not only to maintain patriarchy maintain ചെയ്യാൻ മാത്രമല്ല, but also caste purity. So caste plays an important role in Brahminical patriarchy. So Brahminical patriarchy affects women in different ways according to your positionality in caste. Upper caste women ആണോ, lower caste women ആണോ, അതോ middle caste. So ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള differences, in which position you are, അതനുസരിച്ച് how patriarchy controls you changes. So in this movie, you have 2 characters, Janet and Rosie. Rosie plays the actress and Janet plays the wife to Daniel. These 2 characters embody the dichotomy. This is a perfect example of Brahminical patriarchy, where Janet plays the ideal, perfect wife who exists as the other to JC Daniel, while Rosie is the disposable Dalit naive woman who is just trying to make her ends meet, trying to get a little dignity and trying to work her way up. And this is set in British Travancore, when you could not find an actress because social life, public life was a taboo. ആ സമയത്ത് നടികൾ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പെർഫോമൻസ് ചെയ്യുന്ന പെണ്ണുങ്ങളെ മോശമായിട്ട് കണ്ടിരുന്നത് കൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ആണുങ്ങൾ ക്രോസ് ഡ്രസ് ചെയ്തായിരുന്നു ആക്ടിങ് ചെയ്തിരുന്നത്. So it is at that time that Daniel wanted to take a movie and he wanted to cast an actress. So in the initial scenes, we see how his friends say, why don't Janet act? Janet ne abhinayippichude. So Daniel, Janet both oppose because they express concern about being ostracized. ആൾക്കാർ എന്ത് പറയും, എന്നോട് പിന്നെ ആൾക്കാർ ostracize ചെയ്യും, എന്നോട് ആരും മിണ്ടത്തില്ല. So there's a fear of social exclusion, a fear of non-conformity. While Rosie, the actress, is already a performer of Kakarasi Natagam, and she's already in public view, and she is from a Pulaya caste who has been Margam Cherna Christianai, Casteen escape cheyamannoru situation. So they are selling her, tell her to come and act in such a way that it appears as like a stepping stone for her. So that is like being an actress and an improvement for Rosie, while for Janet, it's a stepping down. So you can see how different their life is, even though they are both women in a British Travancore region. So this kind of like, I had mentioned methodology, I'm using theories from Indian feminist thought, Black feminist thought, and post-colonial thought. So Bell Hooks, who's like a very important feminist and especially in Black feminist movement, she talks about how there was a division in the US about, the pure, white, innocent women who are from the white race and these sexually promiscuous and disposable Black women. Similarly, in India, there's this division between this pure, innocent, and homely, domestic upper caste women and these laboring, sexually promiscuous, and available Dalit women, which is quite evident in this movie, and it is also reflected in the appearance of both these characters. That's where gendered colorism comes in. Race and skin are constantly invoked in the film through dialogues, images, especially in relation to Rosie. There are several instances in the movie where the darker skin tone of Rosie is disguised under the guise of appearance. In Malayalam, we have the word Vesham, right? Vesham could mean anything from makeup to your dress or how you play or how you act. So it kind of is an umbrella term for appearance in general. So we keep hearing this word in this movie saying, Vesham Idumbol, Rosie will become Sarojini. Rosie, the Dalit, will become the Sarojini, the Nayar lady in the film. So you need to change your appearance. You need to change from looking Dalit, looking dark, to an upper caste woman. And they kind of try to show how empowering lighter skin is in this movie. So the film deals with skin color in two capacities. One is how Daniel casts a darker skinned and lower caste woman to play an upper caste woman role and transforms darker skinned Rosie to lighter skinned Saranjali. And second, this we are talking about the film within the film which the Daniel is taking. And the second is the film Celluloid engages in the practice of color coding. So you can see in the movie, all Dalit characters, all lower caste characters are invariably dark skinned, while all the upper caste characters are lighter skinned. All the villains, Mr. Pillai, Daniel, and everyone is lighter skin tone, while all the Dalit characters are darker skin. And you can also see that there is kind of like a gender division when it comes to darker skin, because darker skinned men are also seen playing secondary roles, while darker skinned women are absolutely just Dalit characters, restricted to Dalit characters. So the film Celluloid engages in the practice of color coding as a method to types. All Dalit women are by dark skinned actors, while Janet is played by a lighter skinned characters. So there's this concept called pigmentocracy. Pigments are things which are like darker skin, which has more color in it. So pigmentocracy means there's this hierarchy within representation and within movies where lighter skin roles are given to heroes and heroines, while darker skin roles are given to the secondary roles or like the villain characters. There are numerous examples when it comes to Rosie and Janet's and how this Brahmanical patriarchy is intertwined with colorism. You can see it in the song Enundodi, and you can see it in the makeup scene where she is transformed into Sarojini and how happy she is and how she starts to consider herself beautiful. So these are all examples of colorism within the movies. Second is decolonialism. So because this is set in British Travancore, masculinity and gendered colorism kind of plays a role. So when we talk about gender research, it's not just about women and femininity. We are also looking at how men perform their gender, how the people who do not belong to either perform their gender, how it is viewed by other people. So we are also looking at masculinity and how it is shown. So because it is set partially in British Travancore, there's a huge shade of colonial influence, the images, characters, and story. As you can see in the picture, Daniel is kind of showing people how to make a kind of explaining how who Rosie is and what she's going to be doing to the cinematographer. So the language politics of South India is also well reflected in the movies. It shows an anti-colonial, anti-Norse sentiment of the Dravidian culture while embracing Malayalam and Tamil. Daniel, as a character, performs as the best of both worlds, positioned in between coloniality and nationalism, who's forward looking and socially committed, embodying the liberal values popularly associated with present day Kerala. But Daniel is shown to school the British cinematographer. He is actually schooling the British cinematographer. So there's this post-colonial thinker called Franz Fanon, and he's absolutely wonderful. So he talks about exhibitionist demonstrations shown by post-colonial subjects. So Daniel plays this role where he demonstrates how great he is. He kind of tries to reaffirm his masculinity by trying to school the white person in the scene. So he kind of comes and introduces Rosie to the cinematographer, and he asks, "What, a black girl? Isn't she supposed to be a Naya woman? Why is a black girl?" So you have to see the colonial language of white and black. And then Daniel, as the person who is in between colonial rule and who's liberal and outlooking, kind of says, like, at least in cinema, we should not be thinking about caste and color. So these kind of instances where Daniel is kind of trying to reaffirm his masculinity over the white people and over the other people is seen throughout the movies. And gender-skewed color coding, where darker-skinned men play a secondary role, which excludes Dalit character, as I said, points towards a lower degree of colorism, color coding among male characters. The permissibility of darker skin is limited to Dalit characters for women. That is, if a darker skinned woman is portrayed or represented in the cinema, it's usually always a lower caste woman, and you cannot be darker skinned and non-Dalit in movies. While men in the film can cross that boundaries, reflecting gendered colorism, which is heavily caste coded as well. The third sub-theme in Celluloid was cinema and its subversive potential. In this movie, Daniel is in love with cinema, and he keeps mentioning the power and the magic of cinema. You can convert the lower class Rosie to the upper class Sarojini. You can convert, there's a few instances where he talks about Mr. Pillai and says it not only converts lower caste into upper caste, it can also do the reverse. So there's like, he talks about the subversive potential and in the movies, but the film, though it says and discusses the potential of cinema as a platform for inversion of social reality, the words resistance and subversion are not used. They talk about magic, the ability of visual media to influence and do magic. This is very similar to feminist film theories, which regard cinema and art as a battleground. Cinema has huge potential because it can influence a lot of people, because we're seeing this every now and then, and we kind of look up to, we idolize all these characters and the actors, so it has immense potential to make change. But what happened with Celluloid was, though it addresses caste politics, though it addresses changes in Malayalam movie, it collapses in its addressal of gender and colorism. Manju Edachira, who's a gender scholar herself, talks about systematic erasure of Dalits in the process of archiving history in Celluloid, particularly in Celluloid, because you do not hear about Rosie. It's all about Daniel. Rosie becomes disposable after the second half of the movie. There is no form of resistance towards breaking caste and color connotations as well. So this is how you integrate colorism into other theories and kind of try to see how everything is interconnected and how it comes up and how change can be made and how, in what way the change should be made. Moving on to the second movie, Kamatti Padam, which was a huge hit. It is an action drama inspired by modern Kerala history. Situated in Kochi, it talks about Kochi and the gentrification and ghettoization of the Dalit settlements induced by rapid urbanization of Kochi. It captures the seizure of land belonging to Dalits by huge corporations and how the cities are built over these minorities and the lives of under the bridge people. So as I mentioned earlier, because of the audience, you have to tell how the movie is, set the historical context, and who are the people mentioned in this movie and their history and how the plot is. Similar to celluloid, there are three main themes: Dalit femininity and masculinity, gentrification and violence, and light skin messiah. Talking about Dalit femininity and masculinity, Indian society has adopted a specific type of ideal femininity and masculinity. Everywhere there is different kinds of femininity and masculinity. Butler, in her most of her work, she talks about gender performance, how people perform gender, how as Uttara, as someone who studied abroad, who came back, who's a Malayali, performs gender will be very different to someone who lives in Latin America and performs her gender. So there are different kinds of femininity and masculinity. So gender performance in terms of the imposed binary, imposed by whom? Imposed by the patriarchy, the binary of masculinity and femininity. And the social and ideological constructs or practices associated with it. How do we show our femininity and masculinity? It's through the social practices, it's through the constructs, it's what we wear, how we behave. So these are all not fixed. It's not fixed. It changes according to time, it changes according to space, and it changes according to social groups. So this is what Butler means when she talks about gender performance. So while we are performing gender, because India is such a heterogeneous place, we have different kinds of femininity and masculinity. But there's one specific type of ideal femininity and masculinity which is talked by Ananthi, Chakravarti, and Rage and everyone. And this is upper caste masculinity and femininity. While the lower caste people are explained or defined in relation to the upper caste people. They are the antithetical of the upper caste people. So there are multiple articulation and variants in femininity and masculinity. Dalit femininity and masculinity are interpreted in relation to upper caste. So we again have two female characters, which is Anita and Rosamma. So there's one similarity between celluloid and Kamati Padam in terms of representation of women, which is of Latin women, Latin Catholic women, or women who have converted to Christianity. They are shown as a foul-mouthed, loud women who do not conform or who are not the proper ideal domestic women. So you can see how Rosamma fits into this loud, obnoxious character who is very loud and is stubborn. While Anita, though she's a Dalit character who's dark-skinned, both are dark-skinned female leads, she kind of is the romantic lead to a non-Dalit hero, which never happens in Malayalam movies, right? The hero always falls in love with an upper caste girl, even if he himself is Dalit. So this is a refreshing change where you have a Dalit female lead playing opposite a non-Dalit hero. So there are these two, there's a dichotomy, even though both are Dalit female characters. There's difference in Rosamma and Anita, where Anita kind of replaces the perfect wife, the domestic wife, where she just doesn't have much agency unless in the end where she kind of plays the victim through dialogues. When you see the movie, you can see it. So you can see how there's a conscious effort to reimagine conventional beauty, because though both the lead characters are dark skinned, there's like repeated narratives where they talk about their skin color and kind of make it obvious that they're casting dark skinned women, and then additionally trying to normalize, but kind of failing at it to normalize because they invoke the dark skin tone of the female lead always. So there's a conscious effort to reimagine conventional beauty ideals, and but nevertheless, the explicit mention of skin color. Anita is non-confrontational, but is able to cross the beauty divide. There's a beauty divide as in if you are Dalit, if you are Dalit and dark, there's a ceiling to your level of beauty. You can be beautiful though you are Dalit, or you can be beautiful though you're dark. So she crosses that line, she becomes dark and beautiful, but she loses any other characteristics which could have molded the character. So she remains proper, which read as upper caste. You can read it as upper caste. She retains elements of upper caste characters, while Rosama plays the beautiful Christian Dalit confrontational character. So there's also showing different kinds of Dalit femininity. And when we look at masculinity, it's kind of very different and very monolithic. Both main characters, Balan and Ganga, are Dalit men which is played by dark-skinned actors. Both of them were given buck teeth, prosthetic teeth, protruding teeth, I don't know, to embody the character or to show the Dalitness. And their characters are kind of fit into this narrative of colonial. This is in post-colonial thought, where you regard Dalits as the other of the Hindu upper caste. The Hindu upper caste are the heroic people. They are the ideals, while the Dalit men form the other with insecurities and less of a manhood. There are many instances, but there is also difference between Ganga and Balan. Both of them are considered not conventionally beautiful or conventionally handsome. They are both considered not good looking enough, while the main character, the non-Dalit character played by Krishnan, is effortlessly beautiful, effortlessly handsome. And his appearance is kind of exalted in multiple instances by both Balan and Ganga. And you can see Ganga playing the inadequate other of Krishnan. There are instances like when they're trying to start a bike, Krishnan starts the bike in one go while Ganga struggles. And these are all showing how there's this lack of manhood or masculinity in Ganga and his insecurities. And one thing we should note is the characters such as Balan and Rosie, the similarity between them is they play these kind of magical, naive, everyone likes these characters, they're very lovable, but they play the addition. Their whole character is to enable the main characters. So in Hollywood movies, there's this term called magical negro, which means these are the characters, secondary characters, who play friends to the main characters and do not have agency of their own, but they ask the help for the main character. So I have coined this term called magical Dalit, where Balan and Rosie and everyone are magical Dalits who are so nice enough to be liked by everyone, but they do not have a character of their own. Moving on, so you can see different kinds of femininity and masculinity in the movies. You see Anita, you see Rosama, you see Balan, you see Ganga, but there's only one ideal masculinity, which belongs to the main non-Dalit character, Krishnan, who's also conventionally prettier than the others. Moving on to gentrification and violence. This movie confronts contemporary issues facing the people that occupy Dalit ghettos, as mentioned. Nevertheless, it is a non-Dalit and upper caste retelling of Dalit life. The representation of Dalit men as violent and psychotic is evident throughout the movie, both Ganga and Balan, and the introductory scene. You can see in the introductory scene of Balan where he is in front of a cinema theater who's like ecstatically violent just for a small cause, like selling tickets, being prohibited to sell tickets. He goes fully crazy. He's in his underwear. It's almost animalistic in nature, where he shows so much anger for something so silly, while Ganga is also this brutal, animalistic, naive, dumb person who cannot be controlled. They have kind of like an inner beast within them who are ruthless and reckless. This is like a portrayal of Dalit characters. So representation of Dalit men as dark, violent, and potent is a repeated and heavily used trope all over the Indian film, and it is talked about by Banerjee in her 2012 work, and Suraj Yangde in his marvelous book called Caste Matters. And this kind of turns, it's a non-Dalit and upper caste retelling of Dalit life. It kind of takes away the Dalitness from the movie, so it becomes commercially successful. This is where you can see how cinema is like this space between art and commerce. If they have to make this work, if they have to tell a Dalit story, they have to take some Dalitness out of it, something out of it to make it work. The third sub-theme was light skin messiah. Light skin messiah comes from a parallel in Hollywood, which is called the savior trope, where a white hero always plays the savior to the struggling black life. Similarly, here Krishnan, hero who's non-Dalit, lighter skin, is playing the hero while the Dalits are all victims and asking him for help, and he is the last man standing. This kind of reignites the Messiah trope. This rejects the subversive potential within the movie and also kind of steals the Dalit viewers from a hero they can identify with, which is non-stereotypical. So this covert casteism found in the form of color coding, stereotyping, and a Savarna gaze. When I was thinking about Kammati Padam, I was thinking there's something missing, there's some problem which I cannot identify. And then I saw the movie so many times and I understood that one character which is not needed in this whole movie to tell the story is Krishnan. You don't need this main character unless you want it to be a non-Dalit film. So Hero, the light-skinned actor, kind of is an add-on to the film to turn the film from being a Dalit film into a film about Dalit life. This also shows that there's extensive color coding, there's extensive stereotypical stereotypes which goes with Dalit characters in Indian movies, which is still there. When you look at Kammati Padam, the last sequence of the movie where he goes to take revenge, you can see that though this movie is about Dalit lives and how they struggle and everything, there's not one Dalit person to be seen in the penultimate scene of Kammati Padam. It is Krishnan who kind of does everything. So this movie kind of retells and takes or appropriates the story of Dalit lives to say and makes it into a non-Dalit movie which could be appreciated commercially. And it also has immense instances of colorism, which also has colonial influence. For example, when Krishnan first goes to buy a necklace for Anita, the workers was black or white, though we are all brown people, like our language, so this comes from a colonial nature. And this movie, even though it tries to break the conventional beauty ideal by casting darker skinned women, though it is a Dalit role, it kind of fails at the portrayal of Dalit men. So when I was explaining the whole thesis, one of the major things when you look at gender research is intersectionality. I hope all of you are familiar with the word intersectionality. This was coined by Crenshaw, who was a lawyer, and she kind of talks about, this is about multiple identities and multiple positions a single person can hold. So it shows how the interconnected nature of social categorization such as race, class, and gender apply to a given individual or group. It could be overlapping or interdependent. So for example, me, Uttara, has many identities within me. I'm a woman, I'm from this social class, I'm from this period, I have this much education. So these are all things which would make me who I am. So if someone is doing a study on me, they should all take into consideration all these variables. So when we look into any variable, so when we look into colorism, we have to see gender, we have to see class, we have to see caste, we have to see positions, and we have to see how all of this is tied together. So intersectionality is the way forward, while also looking at regional specificities. Me being from Kerala, me being from this particular class, me being an Indian, all these should be taken into consideration while looking at a research. So you have to look at the context, which social, cultural, economic variables could play a role in it, what is the cause, what is the effect, and we also have to think about outside binaries of like men, women, dark, white, and how these things work and why these are the main things which exist in the society and why they are interconnected. So when we look, I thought I'll first explain intersectionality, but I had to see how I thought I would first show you how my thesis is, and then I can point out. For example, Rosie. Rosie is a Dalit. Rosie is a woman. She's an actress. These are all things. So you have to look at her class, caste, and position. Janet, you see, like, both of them are women, but, their difference comes in caste and class. So when you look at these things and when you tie it together to literature review, that is when you get meaningful conclusions. So moving to conclusions, out of the two movies, colorism was evident in the films, both films. When I looked at explicit and implicit methods of observation, skin color is a significant factor in the films, especially in terms of characterization of different roles for representation. Hence, ways of representation can be identified as racialized. So if you are representing a Dalit character, it would be played by a darker person. That is what I mean by racialized. Second main conclusion was dark-skinned characters are represented in line with popular narratives associated with socio-cultural and economic stereotypes formed through years of retelling. So as I mentioned earlier, there are specific connotations. So when you represent a dark person on screen, there's a lot of connotations which come with it, which is all coming from the popular narratives and retelling of biological myths which has happened, which is based on Aryan model of superiority, which is based on colonialization and historical movements which happened in India, and is still holding on strongly. Caste is identified as the most prominent socio-cultural and economic connotation tied to the characters played by dark-skinned actors in the film. Third, this is a very important point. Dark-skinned women in the film appear as an approved anomaly, means they are not common, they are not expected to come, darker-skinned women in Indian films, but it is approved. It is okay if they are placed within the films in specific roles such as Dalit women, while the rest of the space is occupied by male characters. This points towards the absence of a space in the films for dark-skinned women to play characters which are devoid of meaning socially attached to their skin color. So if a dark woman has to be cast in the movies, it need to be for some reason. You can't just normally cast dark-skinned women in Malayalam movies. Gendered colorism is also observed in two capacity. One is permissibility of dark-skinned male to cross stereotypes. As I mentioned earlier, they can play other roles as well. And the ceiling on the darkness prescribed to female characters. That is, when you look at Kamati Padam, for example, you can see Balan and Ganga are very dark-skinned. But when it comes to the female, they are lighter skinned than the corresponding Dalit alternative. So women have a prescribed darkness. There's a limit to the amount of darkness they can hold in their skin, and which is directly related to the men of the group. Hence, there's a ceiling on the darkness of female of the group directly linked to the male, along with the restriction on the type of roles. So first, there's a restriction on type of roles that can play, and also there's a restriction on the amount of darkness they can hold in their skin. Gendered representation in the film in terms of gender roles and performance are not homogeneous, which is welcome. However, is hierarchical and presented within the Brahmanical gaze, which defines beauty ideals and virtues in terms of caste norms. The retelling and representation showcased in the film, while acknowledging the existence of multiple masculinity and femininity, maintain the Savarna articulation as the ideal and eliminate the possibility of an oppositional gaze or a Dalit hero or heroine. So the main conclusions are the study helped to trace out the proximity and influence the socio-cultural and economic norms of the Indian society and cinema have on each other. Due to the popularity of various connotations tied to skin colors, a darker colored body has inherent cultural meanings. So that means that skin color becomes an important prop in films. It is a visual features, and it is as it can be marked different, it is used to convey meanings to audience. Skin color was found to be a major factor in casting choices and a signifier of specific gender and social identities. The findings reveal that film reflect and adhere to above-mentioned skin color-based stereotypes and help to maintain the status quo of social, cultural, gender inequality, underutilizing the subversive potential of cinema. So I'm calling out and saying in this that movies can do better. They can use the subversive potential of cinema to break these stereotypes, to break these hierarchies and cross boundaries, cross beauty boundaries, cross gender boundaries, cross caste boundaries, and be a medium of resistance, in short. Moving on. So this is an example of one of the gender works I've done during my time as a student and a scholar. I've also done gender research on these other areas. So if you're not interested in film, you can do, and if you are more interested in economics and budgeting or like policy planning, you can do on gender budgeting. So these are works I have done. So I've done gender budgeting, which is like very policy oriented through interviews. I've also looked at unit level data, taking data from the national sources and seeing how caste, gender, and employment works. The third one is what I mentioned today, gendered colorism, how it works. You can also look at disaster management. I've in a project based on floods and how the camps were managed and how gender sensitive it was. Was it different for men and women? And this was done through interview and survey. I've been part of Kerala Migration Survey, which is an all Kerala service, and also like you can engage in cure research, and there are umpteen opportunities, umpteen ways of doing research, gender research. You can do it through interviews, you can do it through data, you can do it through films. So it depends upon your interest, and I hope I inspire at least few students to engage into gender research, and I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Veera ma'am, for your valuable and informative words. And it was indeed a very good section for us. Thank you, ma'am. There is an important announcement. The feedback form link is available in the chat box. Also, participants kindly fill it up for getting your e-certificates. Thank you. Now it's time for the participants to clear their queries. Participants, over to you.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
It's kind of broken, sir. It's
what about now?
yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Maybe just a concern. I'm not familiar in your literature much, but just a curiosity. I'm asking this question because I'm just watching some Malayalam movies. Okay. Regarding your argument in Comedy Padam, and you broadly say that the legal scheme to represent some type. But let me, Anita or Krishnan, they're both black colored. So if it is white colored, would it be possible for the director to communicate the same kind of idea to the audience? That is one concern. Second, with regard to the audience, would it be possible for the audience of Kerala? I don't want to say that the intellectual majority, around 90% or maybe 70% of audience, would it be possible for the audience to accept that it as a reality? So after all, cinema is a reflection from the society, and the director want to, want to tell something out of that, right? And Comedy Padam, I think that he is actually broadly successful in that. So how do you respond to my concern?
Yeah. So this is a very good question. So, sir, what I'm trying to say is there is this stereotypes, right? Like when you think about a Dalit person, you think about a darker skinned person, and that's why the director cast a darker skinned person, because that's what most people associate Dalit characters with, and the meaning kind of translates. My argument is that that is a popular misconception, and cinema as a platform has this potential to be subversive. This is a platform which can resist things. So me being a Dalit myself, I've been asked this question, oh, you're a Dalit, you don't look like one. So this is a popular misconception that you have to look a certain way to be this character, or be Dalit, or be lower class. For example, we had this huge viral photograph of this guy who was a chai maker in Pakistan or something, because he was so good looking. So if you're good looking, you can't be lower class. If you're good looking, or like lighter skinned, or like, stylish, you can't be Dalit. These are all misconceptions. And I think it's high time that, Bell Hooks talks about artistic integrity, and then she talks about how sometimes imitating life as is, even though this is not life as is kind of loses its purpose, because you kind of are representing rather than representing. You're representing the stereotypes which is already there. So if I would like to take an anti-example of what you said, like, say if he had a lighter skinned Dalit person, people would think, okay, maybe Dalit persons can be lighter skinned, or why not? So they lost that opportunity. That's what I'm trying to say. And in my literature review of the whole thesis, I have kind of used a lot of genetic studies which kind of say that all the groups in India has ancestry which is so mixed that you cannot isolate one group and say that, they would have a biological difference, say, for example, darker skin than the other group, because it's kind of impossible because of early racial mixing. So these are all popular misconceptions which kind of need to change. And I also recommend this short film to everyone, which is called Discrete Charms of Savarna. This is again about a director who kind of tries to appoint an actor, a Dalit actor. So they kind of divide it into two and say Dalit actor is not someone who plays who is Dalit, but kind of plays because he looks Dalit. So they are kind of looking for someone who looks Dalit, and they go to colonies and they kind of contact all their Dalit friends, and they are all lighter skinned, either lighter skinned or like looks posh, or like, doesn't look Dalit enough. So they kind of go and takes one of their upper caste friends and kind of darkens his skin tone to play the Dalit character. So that is kind of how representation works in movies, and that's exactly what has to change. Thank you. Any other questions?
Ma'am, can I ask a question? Yes. Firstly, your session was so good to hear. I'm so glad that I listened. So what I want to ask is that in queer literature, we say that if a queer character is not written by a queer author, it cannot be, portrayed nicely. Like the character falls short because it's not written by someone who doesn't know the experience. So is it the same for a Dalit character to be represented nicely? Does the director and the writer needs to be Dalit?
Ideally, no. Ideally, in a world where everyone understands everything and is sensitive to each other, you don't need a Dalit director to do a Dalit movie. But unfortunately, most Savarna directors gets it wrong. So that is when you should be open to critiques. So just as you said, like queer characters or even women characters written by men are sometimes very ridiculous and very, utopian, you can say. Ideally, we would be in a world where men can write women characters, non-queer people can write, and queer people can write straight characters, and Dalit people can do movies which are not just Dalit, like not just about Dalit life. They can do movies about like comic movies or like stuff. But right now we are in a society where we are so disintegrated and so full of misconceptions that it's kind of quite hard, but we cannot say that, it's impossible. It's definitely possible. And I think it should come up. Everyone should start doing everything. But it is very important to be sensitive to the characters you do and how it comes across. So, just be responsible in what you do. And I hope we'll have many more stories about the characters, about minorities, about women, which are exceptionally good. But I also would like to add, if the director is non-Dalit, but he takes inputs from Dalit people and he knows them, and he's up to critique, then it could make an amazing product, an art product. But what kind of takes it apart is, the problem is, who are we catering to? The audience is always thought of as straight, upper class, and non-queer people. So you are kind of the market. When we talk about film being a market, the commerce perspective is always about the audience. So what we can change is, we should stop watching movies which doesn't make sense. We should demand for better movies. And for example, in Spain, when I was there, if a movie is anti-queer, then most people, even straight people, don't go and watch it. But here, that's not the case. Just like the sir's question, would the audience be able to accept a lighter-skinned Dalit character? Can the Malayali society do it? So it kind of starts from either ends. You start demanding for more proper representation, and also you start doing it. So it works on both ends. And I hope I've answered your questions. Like, ideally, no, everyone should be able to do it. But right now, directors like Paranjit, who's Dalit himself, is making amazing movies on Dalit lives in Tamil Nadu, while we lack a director of the same grandeur or like same potential. But hopefully we'll get it, and it'll all be wonderful soon.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Uttara. Indeed, you have done a wonderful session regarding. I have just a wonder. This is not a query. Just one doubt regarding your methodology. You have studied. You have analyzed last 10 years Malayalam cinema. Is last 10 years. Can you see? Can you see any change in the gender stereotype or caste stereotype or color means depiction of colorism in this movie from this last 10 years? Can you see the means it may be at the beginning of the first decade, it may be changed that because the modernization and all the social changes may affect our caste structure and casteism and this body shaming, all these means modernization process have been influenced a lot. Whether can you see this type of change in this analyzing the cinemas in the last years?
Yeah, so I was looking at movies which had female leads who were dark-skinned, and these are the two movies which came, in which the darker-skinned female lead had like a substantial time in the movie. And as ma'am asked, I think there are changes. Obviously, like, it's not as explicit. So you might not say like, oh, you're ugly because you're dark, but you might cast someone who's dark-skinned to be the ugly character. So it's kind of more implicit now. Body shaming. So I was looking at, so I thought I'll also take Action Hero Biju, which was like this huge commercial hit, because there's a lot of elements of body shaming in it. Even now in movies like fat jokes, cure jokes, Dalit jokes are also rampant. For example, ma'am, when you asked me this question about Dalit characters, a very recent movie called Kala after Veena Thomas, it had this Adivasi character. Both of them were very brutal and it was a violent movie. They were both acting, but this Dalit, this Adivasi character had this animalistic nature, which was quite hard for me to sit and watch as a Dalit viewer myself. So is there improvement? Yes. For example, in Kamattipadam, the actress being darker skinned than usual actors is like a very positive view. Or in Kumbalangi Nights, you had non-stereotypical actors and leads, which is also really nice change. But is it enough? Not yet. But is there an improvement? Yes, in some regards. But I don't think there's any improvement in while showcasing Dalit characters. Even when the character representation is kind of good or like, you know, okay-ish compared to relative to other areas, other characters, the storyline goes horribly wrong. Like the recent movie, I forgot the name, Veta or something, no, of Kunchako Bobbin and Nimisha. So like either the representation is not good enough, or like it's a Savarna retelling of the story, or Nayata. Thank you. My mom just came and told me the movie. So it's Nayata. So like, you know, one or the other things go, but there has been huge improvement. In Indian film, in Indian movies, caste was such a silent thing. It was never mentioned. You always had Savarna leads. It was always Nayar Varma or someone. But it's kind of changing, but I hope it's in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
The strong pillar of sociology department to deliver the vote of thanks.
Okay. Thank you. A warm good afternoon to all of you present here. Really, it is a great pride for me to propose vote of thanks in this international webinar, because we have enriched with a scholastic thoughts and thought is scholastic delivered by Ms. Uttara. On the behalf of the pioneers of the Department of Sociology of BCN College, I would like to take the opportunity to propose the vote of thanks all those who have directly and indirectly contributed to this seminar. Ms. Uttara, today's keynote speaker, have a scholastic talk on gendered colorism in Malayalam movie. Through this seminar, she has clearly depicts how the colorism works in Malayalam films and how the gendered pattern colorism in Malayalam film. I think this gender-related research, her methodology is also very attractive, and it is. I think really it is a lot of young scholars maybe motivated her the gender research. That is really it is opening the new visa of knowledge to all the scholars, those who have present here. Uttara, thank you so much for your enlightened presence and your knowledge. Thank you, Uttara. Thank you so much. I also thank the principal and other faculty members of our college and other principals, principal HODs of our department, HOD of our department, Alfonso Kurian, and other faculty members of the college, and other those students, those who have come outside our college and outside our state. I thank you all for coming here, and also I thank all the organizing members, those who have their support and coordination for this seminar. I also thank all the students, those who actively participate to this webinar. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rija ma'am. So we have come to the end of the program. So once again, thanking you for joining the program and making it a grand success. And hereby we can wind up the program. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Uttara, so much for your exceptional talk, exceptional content-rich, content-rich. Thank you so much.